At my daughter's birthday party, I found my husband kissing my son's preschool teacher, the same woman who helped me plan the whole event. He said she understood him better, and I should just be a mom. He gave her the diamond necklace I thought was for me, then cut the cake as I cried in front of everyone, until I stood on the table, grabbed the mic and I didn't even realize what I was looking at first. The laughter, the balloons, the smell of frosting, it all blurred into one loud, dizzy haze as I stood frozen in the hallway of our rented party room at the community center. My daughter's 6th birthday party was in full swing. Kids were running around with unicorn cupcakes, my parents were sitting by the gift table, and I had just stepped away to grab the extra plates from the car. But when I came back through the side door, I saw my husband, Ethan, standing behind the bounce house with Miss Hannah, my son's preschool teacher. Her hands were on his chest, his were tangled in her hair, and then he kissed her. At first, my brain refused to process it. The woman who'd helped me plan this entire party, the woman who had texted me Pinterest ideas, who told me she admired my family, was now pressing herself against my husband at my daughter's birthday. And the worst part, the small, square box in his hand, I knew that box. I had found the receipt 2 weeks earlier and knew it was for me, a diamond necklace, a gift for our 10-year anniversary. But then I saw him clasp it around her neck. Her hand went to her throat like she was in a dream, eyes shimmering like she was the one being proposed to. And right after that, he walked back into the main room like nothing had happened, microphone in hand, saying, "All right, everyone, let's cut the cake." My hands were shaking so bad that I dropped the stack of plates. No one noticed except Hannah. She gave me this tiny, smug smile before slipping into the crowd, her hair now covering the glittering necklace. He didn't even look at me as he handed our daughter the knife to help him slice the cake. The kids sang, parents clapped, and I just stood there, my vision tunneling, trying to keep from collapsing. My mother caught my eye from across the room. I must have looked deranged because she started to get up, but I held up a hand. Not yet, because right then I realized something. Ethan wasn't even trying to hide it. He wanted me to see, to humiliate me quietly, publicly. To put me in my place. He turned, handed me a slice of cake and said under his breath, "Let's just be civil, don't ruin this for the kids. You're good at that being a mom, just be that." That's when something in me snapped. The room blurred out, but his words kept echoing, "Just be a mom," like I was a background character in his perfect life, so I did what he never saw coming. I climbed up onto the table. My shoes sank into frosting. People gasped. Ethan looked up, the knife still in his hand, and I grabbed the mic. I was shaking, but my voice came out steady when I said, "Since we're celebrating family today, there's something everyone should know about the guest of honor and his little helper." Everyone went quiet. Even the kids stopped laughing. Ethan's face went white. What I said next would ruin him completely. But before I tell you exactly what happened on that table, you need to understand how we got here. Because this betrayal didn't start at that party. It started months before, when I mistook pity for love and loyalty for weakness. Ethan and I met 12 years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was 25, working as a pediatric nurse, and he was the charming new contractor hired to renovate the children's wing of the hospital. He had that easy smile, the kind of confidence that made you feel like everything was under control when he spoke. Everyone adored him, but he only had eyes for me, at least that's what I believed back then. He'd show up at my station with coffee, bring me late-night snacks when I was on call, and tell me how different I was from other women. "You actually listen," he said once, like that was the rarest thing a man could find. I should have seen it as a warning, not a compliment. We married within a year. At the time, I thought I'd won the lottery. He was attentive, funny, good with kids. My parents adored him. He used to dance with me in the kitchen, no music, no reason, just because. When I got pregnant with our first child, he built the crib himself, sanding it by hand, saying, "Our baby deserves something made with love." But over time, things shifted. It wasn't sudden, it was slow, sneaky, like a leak you don't notice until your whole basement's flooded. After our son was born, I quit my job to stay home, like we'd agreed. He said we could afford it. But soon, that decision became ammo. "You don't understand the stress I'm under," he'd say. You don't have to keep anyone happy except the kids. When our daughter was born, he started working later. Then weekends, always just one more project. But he didn't come home tired, he came home irritated. Like being around us was another job, I tried to bridge the gap. I planned family dinners, surprise date nights, small gestures. He started canceling them last minute, said I was being clingy. Then came Miss Hannah. She started teaching at our son's preschool last fall. Bright, bubbly, maybe 30 at most. I met her at pickup one day when she complimented my daughter's shoes. She remembered my name right away, texted me after a PTA meeting to thank me for being so organized. I thought she was sweet, harmless. When I mentioned I was planning my daughter's birthday, she offered to help. I love doing kid parties, she said. It's kind of my hobby. And honestly, I was grateful. I'd been so stretched thin with Ethan's moods, the house, and the kids that I welcomed the help. Soon she was coming over after work, sitting at our kitchen island with decorations spread out, laughing with me while the kids played in the living room. Sometimes Ethan would come home early and join us, and I remember thinking, finally. Something feels normal again. They got along easily, too easily in hindsight. I'd catch little things, the way she'd lightly touch his arm when she laughed, how his tone softened when he said her name. But I pushed the thought away. I didn't want to be that wife, the paranoid, bitter one. One night after she left, I told him, "She's really nice, huh?" He shrugged. "Yeah, she gets me, doesn't make everything so complicated." It stung, but I let it go. He was tired, I told myself. He didn't mean it like that. Then, a week before the birthday, he came home with a jewelry bag from a local boutique. When I asked about it, he smiled and said, "Just something I've been meaning to get you." You'll see, for days, I walked around in a daze, thinking maybe things were getting better. Maybe the man I fell in love with was coming back. But what I didn't know was that every text Hannah sent me about party prep was also being sent to him, with a different tone. And the morning of the party, when she came over early to help set up, I remember she was wearing this simple dress, her hair up, makeup barely there. She looked like she belonged in my house. It wasn't until I saw her behind that bounce house hours later, wearing my necklace, that I realized she'd been moving into my life piece by piece. And Ethan had been letting her. But here's the thing. That moment at the party, seeing them together, didn't just break me. It woke me up. Because if he thought I'd crumble quietly, he had no idea who I was anymore. The days after the party were a blur of humiliation and white-hot rage. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's hand on Hannah's neck, the glint of that necklace catching the light, his fake, perfect smile as he cut the cake while I stood there holding back tears. But the part that hurt most wasn't even the kiss, it was how comfortable he was with it. Like it wasn't even wrong. Like betraying me in public was something he believed he had the right to do. He didn't come home that night. I told our kids he was working late. I cleaned up the mess from the party, threw away the leftover cake, folded the banner that said "Happy Birthday, Emma," and put it in a box like I was burying a piece of myself. He showed up the next morning, smelling like cologne and cheap hotel soap. I didn't ask. I just stood at the sink, washing dishes, trying to steady my breathing. He leaned against the doorway and said, "We need to talk." I dried my hands and turned around. "About what?" He sighed like he was the one who'd been wronged. "About us, about how this marriage isn't working anymore." I stared at him. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Hannah and we didn't plan this. It just happened. She understands me in ways you don't anymore. You've become someone else, always anxious, always suspicious. I feel like I can't breathe in this house." I laughed, a sound I didn't even recognize. "So your solution is to screw my son's teacher during our daughter's birthday party?" He didn't even flinch. "I didn't mean for you to find out like that." "Like that?" I snapped. "You mean in front of my parents, in front of our kids?" "While she was wearing my necklace?" His jaw tightened. "It wasn't yours, you assumed that." That sentence, it burned through me like acid. He looked almost bored as he continued. "I'm not the bad guy here, you've been distant for years. Everything's about the kids, you forgot about us, about me." I just stood there, gripping the counter until my knuckles turned white. "You want me to feel sorry for you?" He shrugged. I just think it's time you accepted that we've grown apart. You can focus on being a good mom, that's what you're best at. And there it was again. That same damn phrase, just be a mom. He left for a few days to figure things out. But I already knew where he was, Hannah's apartment. The next week was hell. Parents at the preschool started whispering. One mom texted me, "Are you okay?" And I realized they all knew. Someone had seen the kiss. And Hannah, she didn't even bother hiding. She posted a photo on her private Instagram, one of those smug, soft-lit selfies wearing the necklace. The caption said, "Some things just feel right." I wanted to destroy something, but instead I started paying attention. I noticed how Ethan's paycheck hit our joint account on Fridays and disappeared by Sunday. I checked our credit card statements, hotel charges, dinners for two, random gifts. Then, a withdrawal I didn't recognize. $8,000 transferred to a new account. That's when I called my friend Julie, who worked in accounting at a small law firm. I asked her if she could look into it, just hypothetically. 2 days later, she called me back. "Not hypothetical," she said. "He's been moving money into a personal account under his name only. Looks like he's planning to separate finances. He was preparing to leave me, quietly. Strategically, but then something else happened, something that changed everything. One night my son had a nightmare. He came into my room crying, saying he didn't like Miss Hannah anymore. I asked him why. He said, because she told me she's going to be my new mommy soon. My blood went cold. That's when I knew this wasn't just an affair, it was an invasion. Ethan wasn't planning to walk away. He was planning to replace me. After my son's nightmare confession, I stopped pretending everything could somehow go back to normal. I stopped crying. I stopped asking questions. I went cold, methodical. Because if Ethan and Hannah thought they could rewrite my life and cast me out like I was disposable, they were about to learn who they were dealing with. That night, after I put the kids to bed, I opened his office drawers and found what I was looking for. A manila folder with bank statements, printed emails, and what looked like house listings. There was a sticky note on one of them. It said, "Move-in date, June 1. It was March. He was planning to move in with her, and not just anywhere. The address matched the neighborhood of our kids' preschool. He wanted to live right there, close enough to keep playing house with my children, with the woman who'd taken everything from me. I sat on the floor, shaking, until something caught my eye, a document half-tucked behind the folder. When I pulled it out, my stomach dropped. It was a petition for custody modification, filed but not yet submitted. His signature was at the bottom. He was going to take the kids. He'd been building a case, bit by bit, for months, screenshots of texts where I mentioned being stressed or overwhelmed, notes about times I'd been late picking the kids up, even an email to his lawyer mentioning my mental health decline since becoming a full-time mom. He'd been documenting me. Setting me up. Every argument, every tear, every anxious night, I'd been feeding his narrative. I felt sick. The next morning, I called Julie again. She confirmed what I feared. If he's moving assets and preparing custody paperwork, he's probably already retained a lawyer. He's playing the long game. The long game. That phrase echoed in my head. He came home later that day, acting normal. Kissed the kids goodnight, sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. He didn't even look at me. I watched him from the kitchen, remembering how he used to smile when I walked into a room. Now I was invisible, a problem to be managed. But when he went upstairs, I checked his phone on the counter. No passcode. He was arrogant enough to think I wouldn't dare look. I opened his messages with Hannah. There were hundreds. Most were the typical affair garbage. "I miss you. You smell like summer. I can't wait to wake up next to you every day." But then, one message from her made my blood run cold. She wrote, "Once she breaks down in court, it'll be easy. You'll look like the stable one. The kids deserve better." And he replied, "Exactly, she's emotional, not rational. We'll make sure the judge sees that." That's when I realized. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to erase me. I scrolled further. He'd sent her photos of me, screenshots from our family texts, pictures of me crying after arguments, things he'd taken secretly. He'd even told her my insecurities, the postpartum depression I confided in him about, the panic attacks I'd hidden from everyone else. He twisted them into proof that I was unstable. I wanted to scream. Instead, I quietly forwarded every message, photo, and document to my own email. I made copies of everything: bank transfers, custody drafts, texts. By the time I was done, I had a digital folder labeled insurance. Because if Ethan wanted to make me look like the unstable one, I was going to make sure the truth burned brighter than his lies. And then, just when I thought I'd seen the worst of it, I found the message that flipped my stomach. It was from 2 days before the party. She'd texted, "Should I wear it then, or wait until she opens hers?" He replied, "No, wear it. She'll figure it out, maybe it'll make her finally give up." He wanted me to see the necklace. He planned that moment. The kiss wasn't an accident, the necklace wasn't a mistake, the humiliation was deliberate. They had coordinated my public breakdown like it was some sick performance. I closed his phone, my hands trembling. That night, lying awake next to him, I didn't cry. I didn't touch him. I just stared at the ceiling and thought about how I would destroy him piece by piece, the way he'd tried to destroy me. And the first move would happen on his stage, exactly where he tried to humiliate me the first time. Once the plan is visible, when you hold every shred of someone's betrayal in your hand, it changes how you breathe. The rage doesn't melt into tears anymore, it goes quiet and cold and precise. That's how I felt when I labeled the folder insurance. I stopped being the wife who reacted and started being the woman who would make sure he couldn't get away with the story he'd written about me. The first thing I did was not dramatic. I didn't storm into Hannah's classroom or post the photos online. I made the most boring adult decision I could think of. I called a lawyer. Not because I wanted to fight immediately, but because I needed someone who could read evidence and translate it into something that mattered in court and in finance. I called Julie, who put me in touch with a lawyer she trusted, Marta, who'd handled messy family things before. Marta asked me to bring everything. I brought my insurance folder like an offering. Sitting in her office felt like stepping into a neutral room where emotions were a resource, not a liability. Marta didn't gasp or comfort me. She organized. She used words like discovery and temporary orders and evidence preservation. She said 3 sentences I'll never forget. He's already started the narrative. We stop him from running with it, and we script the counter. We filed for preservation of records that day, emails, bank statements, phone records, so nothing could be quietly deleted later. Marta told me to change passwords, to open a separate bank account in my name, and to get copies of everything: medical notes, therapy records, anything that could be twisted into instability. She told me not to give him the satisfaction of watching me unravel. While Marta did the legal scaffolding, I became something else entirely. I learned the language of leverage. I printed text threads, screen-capped social posts, and made photo timestamps. I saved every message where Ethan described me as emotional or difficult. I pulled payroll stubs, traced transfers, and annotated the hotel charges. Every line became an arrow I could point back at him, but paper is paper. I needed witnesses. I needed facts people couldn't pretend didn't exist, so I quietly talked to 3 people without making a scene. I spoke to the preschool director and asked hypothetical questions about staff conduct and relationships with parents. I didn't accuse, I listened. I found out Hannah had been written up the previous year for violating boundaries, something minor on paper but something real. I wrote the director's name and the date in my folder. I also talked to the woman who runs the neighborhood boutique where the necklace was purchased. She remembered Ethan, quiet, self-assured, and gave me a receipt copy and the security camera timestamp showing him in the shop the afternoon before the party. That timestamp became a nail in the coffin. He bought the necklace knowing exactly when he would wear it on someone else. I had proof his humiliation was planned. Then there were the small, human things I did to protect the kids without making them collateral. I called our pediatrician and asked for documentation of my visits where I'd discussed anxiety and postpartum symptoms. Nothing shameful, everything real. I lined up a counselor for myself and requested that any notes be preserved, because if he tried to twist therapy into instability, I wanted context. Dates, diagnoses, progress. My therapist became another witness to my strength, not my weakness. At night, I practiced my voice. Not loud drama, but the voice that would hold up under pointed questions. I wrote a timeline. Every lie, every favor Hannah had used to integrate into my life. Every time Ethan's story deviated from reality. I rehearsed how to say what happened at the party calmly. The kiss, the necklace, the texts where they planned humiliation. I imagined a courtroom and a school board and the quiet looks his parents would give when they learned the truth. I didn't tell anyone I was doing this. Not my mother, not Julie, not even my closest friend, because I needed the element of surprise. Let him keep thinking I was fragile and crumbling. Let him keep thinking his slow erosion of our life had worked. Meanwhile, I was assembling a legal, social, and financial blockade. But planning wasn't only about defense. It was about exposing. I found someone at the local paper who covered community scandals, an off-the-record conversation that left a line of cold comfort. We don't print rumors, but if you have documents and a willing ex who can speak on the record, stories get traction. I didn't want the tabloids. I wanted people who mattered, our families, the preschool board, his business partners, to know exactly who he was. Then I set the part of the plan that made me feel most like the person I used to be, reclaiming rituals. I went to the bakery and ordered a small cake for Emma with a simple note. For Mom and kids, love, Emma. I scheduled family photos with the kids for the following weekend and made sure the photographer's contract protected me from unauthorized use of the prints. I wasn't hiding. I was reclaiming what he'd tried to steal, our public image as a stable home. And the last, riskiest thing I did, I opened a file with all the little pieces that didn't belong in court but would destroy them in living rooms and at PTA meetings. The Instagram post with Hannah wearing the necklace, the text where they gossiped about humiliating me, the hotel receipts and restaurant names. I couldn't use some of it immediately in court, but in the right setting, those pieces would humiliate him the way he'd humiliated me. By the time I closed my insurance folder that night, I had a plan that was equal parts law and theater. I was ready to go on offense and defense at the same time. I had a lawyer, witnesses, financial trail, and a backlist of public proof. I'd taken the one weapon he hoped to use, my emotions, and turned it into documentation. I was no longer waiting for him to make the next move. But plans have a way of colliding with other people's secrets. And I found one secret that I couldn't have predicted, something about Hannah that made everything else feel suddenly smaller and far more dangerous. It was a Tuesday night when I found it, the thing that changed the entire shape of my revenge. It started like any other week of pretending. Ethan was still staying with a friend, though I knew that meant Hannah's apartment. I kept my tone even on the phone with him, acting like I was resigned. The perfect exhausted wife. I needed him calm and overconfident. That night, I was in the kitchen, sorting through receipts for Marta when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, just a text. You don't know me, but you need to check the preschool staff Facebook group. Look at what she's been posting. I froze. My first thought was spam, but something in me said open it. It was a screenshot. A private post from Hannah's alternate Facebook profile, the one for teachers only, apparently. The post was dated 3 weeks earlier. In it, she'd written, "Some people were never meant to be mothers. They think love is control. They think staying home makes them saints. Some of us are built to give kids a better home." And then, attached was a photo. My daughter, Emma, at our party, blowing out candles. It was cropped so it looked like Hannah was standing beside her, not me. I felt my hands go numb. I scrolled down and saw the comments. Teachers, other staff, a few of their friends, all complimenting Hannah on how natural she looked with kids. One even said, "You're going to be such a great stepmom." Hannah had replied with a heart emoji. The date of the post, before the party, was the detail that gutted me. She'd already seen herself as replacing me. She'd already taken photos from my camera roll, because that picture wasn't public. That meant Ethan gave it to her. I forwarded everything to Marta immediately, shaking so badly I could barely type. Within an hour she called me, her voice tight. "This is big. This isn't just adultery. It's defamation and boundary violation. She used your child's image publicly. This changes everything." But what Marta said next made my stomach drop further. Also, I found something else. She'd gone through Ethan's financial transfers again and noticed something. A $5,000 wire to a woman named Melissa Kincaid. I had no idea who that was. Check the preschool's website, Marta said. I did. Melissa Kincaid, preschool director. The woman I'd spoken to about Hannah's conduct. I sat there staring at the screen, realizing what that meant. He'd bribed the director. It explained everything. The lack of disciplinary action, why Hannah hadn't been suspended for her past boundary warning, how she was still allowed near my kids. And suddenly, the humiliation at the party made even more sense. He hadn't just wanted to hurt me emotionally, he was clearing the path legally. If he made me look unhinged in public, and the school vouched for Hannah's professionalism, his custody case would look airtight. He was building a perfect lie, brick by brick. But then the second half of Marta's sentence came through my fog. The money to the director, it didn't come from his personal account, it came from the business. His business, the small contracting company he owned with two partners, that wasn't just unethical, it was criminal, misuse of company funds. If his partners found out, his reputation would implode. His license could be suspended, and every single financial record I'd copied, it proved he'd done it repeatedly, little bonuses to Hannah, consulting fees to the director. All from company money. I sat there at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, realizing the full scope of it. Ethan wasn't just a cheating husband. He was an embezzler, and Hannah wasn't just a homewrecker. She was complicit. The next day I drove to his office building, not to confront him, no. I parked across the street and watched. He came out at lunch, smiling, phone in hand, holding a coffee. Hannah was in the passenger seat of his truck. They looked comfortable, domestic, like a couple who thought they'd already won. I took photos, timestamps, license plate, everything. I sent them to Marta and to an anonymous email I'd set up. Truth Drops 2025 at ProtonMail. Then I composed a message addressed to his two business partners with every document attached. But before I hit send, I hesitated. Not because I doubted the evidence, but because I wanted to make sure he felt it. Not just lose his business. I wanted him to know it was me. I closed my laptop and looked at the calendar on the fridge. The preschool's annual family night fundraiser was next week. He'd be there, she'd be there. The director he'd paid off would be there. And so would I. That would be my stage. The same kind of public scene he'd used to break me. Only this time, every single person would see who he really was. By the time family night rolled around, I already knew the who, what, and how of their betrayal. But what I didn't know yet was why. Why Hannah had been so intent on stealing my life. Why Ethan had turned from the man who once sanded a crib by hand into someone who could humiliate me in front of our children. That answer came out in pieces, each one worse than the last. 2 days before the event, Marta called me into her office. She looked almost hesitant for the first time since I'd hired her. "There's something you need to see," she said. She slid a printout across the desk. It was an email thread between Ethan and a law office I didn't recognize, dated almost 6 months earlier. Subject line, guardianship options. The body of the email was short but devastating. If my wife's mental health continues to decline, and if something were to happen to her, what are the steps to ensure my children's transition to a suitable guardian, preferably someone already involved in their care? Attached was a draft guardianship form. And listed under potential guardian, Hannah Porter, my throat closed up. He was planning this before the affair, Marta nodded grimly. He wasn't just planning to leave you, Lee. He was planning to make sure you'd never get them back. It wasn't just about love or lust or attention. Ethan was trying to erase me legally. She pointed to another email from the same thread, this time from Hannah's personal account, sent weeks later. She's unraveling faster than we thought. The more emotional she gets, the easier it will be to establish a pattern. I've been documenting interactions at school that show she's inconsistent. We'll make a case that she's not safe alone with them. It took me a full minute to process what I was reading. Hannah had been collecting evidence against me, 2 little things, like if I showed up late, if I looked tired, if I seemed distracted at pickup. She was building a paper trail, but the reason wasn't obsession or love, it was control. When Ethan had first met Hannah, she'd been in financial trouble. Her divorce had wiped her out. She had no family nearby, no savings. Ethan's company had done small renovations at the preschool. He'd been the contractor. He'd found her weakness: money. What Marta found next came from bank records, transfers labeled as consultation fees paid to her months before the affair began. He'd been paying her long before the kissing started. I felt sick. He paid her to help him. Worse, Marta said. He paid her to play a role. In Ethan's emails, he wrote that Hannah was stable, nurturing, good with children, emotionally balanced. All the things he'd been telling the court I was. He was grooming her to be the believable replacement. But there was one more part that made my blood run cold. Marta handed me a final document, an unsigned life insurance amendment Ethan had drafted but never filed. In it, he had changed the primary beneficiary from me to the guardian of our children, which, according to his draft, would have been Hannah. I sat there shaking, realizing what that meant. If anything happened to me, an accident, a breakdown, something he could stage or twist, she'd get everything. My home, my savings, the policy, my kids. Ethan's betrayal wasn't about falling out of love. It was about consolidation, of money, control, image. He didn't want a messy divorce. He wanted a clean removal. He'd used Hannah's need for security and her professional credibility as tools. She wasn't just a lover. She was his alibi. I asked Marta, "Do you think she knows what she's part of?" Marta looked me straight in the eye. "She knows enough. She knew you'd lose your kids. She didn't care." That night, I sat on my porch and thought about every conversation Hannah and I had ever had, her fake concern, her compliments, her helpfulness. Every text about decorations or schedules now looked like what it really was. Surveillance. She hadn't been helping me plan a birthday party. She'd been helping him plan my exit. And I realized then that the real horror wasn't just the betrayal, it was how calculated it all was. They'd treated my breakdown, my exhaustion, my motherhood like a strategy map. They'd weaponized my love for my children. Ethan had never stopped planning. Even now, while I was preparing my quiet revenge, he probably thought he was still one step ahead. But family night would be different. He thought it was just another public event, another chance to show the world how stable and respectable he and Hannah were. He had no idea I'd already sent his business partners every piece of evidence. He had no idea Marta had filed for an emergency custody injunction that morning. And he had no idea I was walking into that auditorium with a microphone waiting for me at the podium, his favorite kind of stage. Only this time, the story wasn't his to tell. Family night smelled like cheap coffee and cafeteria pizza. The auditorium lights made everyone look a little honest. I walked in with a folder under my arm, and my lawyer's calm steps behind me like an exhale. Ethan was at the fundraising table, telling old jokes to clients of his contracting company. Hannah was handing out stickers to toddlers, her necklace glittering like the punchline. The director, Melissa Kincaid, smiled from the stage like she owned the room. They'd all arranged themselves into the exact tableau of respectability they'd wanted the world to keep believing in. I kept my face blank. That was the hardest part, looking like a woman who'd been softened by betrayal when I felt like metal under pressure. Marta had told me to let the legal work happen inside the courthouse, but she also knew humans were theater animals. If he wanted a public stage to humiliate me, I would take his stage and break it into something useful. When the MC finished the spiel about volunteer hours and silent auction baskets, he called for special acknowledgments, and that's when the microphone I'd requested days earlier arrived at the podium. Ethan's company partners were in the front row. I saw them glance at each other. I'd emailed them at 11 that morning with copies of bank transfers, the boutique receipt, security camera timestamps, and the email thread about guardianship. I'd addressed it simply: "You deserve to know who you've been in business with." Then I shut my laptop and let the room hold its breath the way rooms do when something heavy is about to fall. I walked up to the stage, and for a second, the sound of the kids coloring and the vendor booths faded. I thought of the night I'd built that crib, hands raw and hopeful. I thought of every small kindness I had offered that had become evidence against me. I thought of Emma's face when she reached for the cake and looked over to find me standing on a chair, grabbing a mic instead. Good evening, I said, and my voice was steady because Marta had taught it to be. I'm Lee Harper. I'm a mother of two, and for a long time I tried to be invisible so the people around me could feel comfortable. Tonight, I can't be invisible anymore. They applauded reflexively, polite and small. Ethan's jaw tightened. Hannah's smile slid. Melissa's eyes flicked away. I have documents, I said, full of emails, transfers, and photos showing that the director of this preschool accepted money to cover up boundary violations. I have messages proving my husband purchased a necklace expressly to humiliate me in public, and plans to make my children's caregiver their legal guardian if I broke down. I've given copies of all of this to Mr. Collins and Mr. Reyes, his business partners, and to the preschool board. I laid the printed pages on the lectern, one by one. The boutique timestamp, the bank transfer logs, the security photo of Ethan in the store, Hannah's post with my daughter, the guardianship draft, the life insurance amendment draft. People craned to see. Someone whispered the word embezzlement. Ethan's face went all the colors of someone whose life was being renamed. Marta stepped up beside me and quietly said, "We have filed for emergency, temporary custody and preservation orders. We've notified law enforcement about possible misuse of company funds. The preschool has been formally reported and will be investigated. For the safety of the children, we ask everyone to remain calm while officials handle the rest." It was surgical. It wasn't gory revenge, it was precise. The room shifted from curiosity to panic. Ethan's partners stood abruptly, murmuring about audits. Ethan tried to move toward the podium, mouth-shaping words that would become nothing. Hannah stood frozen, the necklace suddenly looking too loud for the moment. Melissa's face was a mask someone had slapped on too late. Two police officers who'd been quietly alerted by Marta's paralegal that morning reached the stage and politely asked to speak with the director and Ethan. Someone filmed it. Someone else texted another. The PTA group chat erupted. What followed over the next 36 hours felt like the slow unpeeling of a rotten fruit. The partners called an emergency meeting and froze Ethan's accounts pending an audit. The preschool board placed Hannah and Melissa on administrative leave pending investigation. State regulators opened a compliance inquiry into billing and donations. The boutique manager handed over all footage and receipts without drama. The timestamps matched my folder. Someone at the county clerk's office flagged the guardianship paperwork as suspicious because of the emails and draft I'd handed over. They put a hold on any changes. My emergency custody hearing that Marta had fast-tracked the day before came through with a temporary injunction granting me primary physical custody and requiring supervised visitation, just enough to keep the kids safe while we sorted the mess. Over the next few weeks, I sat in a crystalline kind of watchfulness. I gave deposition after deposition. I held Emma when she cried and kept my voice ordinary so she could anchor herself. The neighbors who'd whispered at the baseball field started saying my name with a different inflection. Respect, not pity. Ethan pressed charges at first. Angry men do that when the rug is pulled out. But his partners had already retained counsel who advised him to step back. There were phone calls in the middle of the night from people I'd never met, clients who wanted the truth. The story spread not through sensational headlines, but through people's unwillingness to trust the man who'd betrayed them. Hannah's mother showed up at one of the hearings in shock, saying she had no idea her daughter had crossed those lines. Melissa was asked to resign before any official letter was required. The contracting company's license board launched an inquiry into misuse of funds. Whether criminal charges would follow depended on auditors and prosecutors. I stopped imagining the worst and started living in the exact facts I had brought into the light. And in the quiet moments, after Marta filed the final custody agreement and the judge signed the temporary orders, I allowed myself to grieve. Not the performative, tear-streaked grief of the party hallway, but the kind that settled in your bones and rearranged them. I grieved the version of my marriage that had existed in photographs and memory, and I honored what the children had to carry through the years we were untangling. Weeks later, when asked in a deposition why I hadn't simply left earlier, why I'd waited until the documents were in place, I said this. Because someone who loves her children isn't allowed to act on hurt without thinking of their safety. I would rather be patient and entire than reckless and silenced. There was a day, a quiet weekday, when Ethan came by to ask for supervised visitation. He looked smaller. Maybe that was karma, maybe it was the weight of the things he'd done. He asked for forgiveness without shame. I answered in the only way that felt honest. I let the court decide what contact would be best for our children, and I told him to get the help he needed if he wanted to be part of their lives at all. In the months that followed, our lives became less about explosive scenes and more about small repairs. I went back to nursing part-time, not because I needed to prove myself, but because it kept me connected to my sense of usefulness. I taught Emma to braid her hair and sat with my son when nightmares came. I learned to laugh again, small and private, when something ridiculous happened at the PTA meeting. Marta kept a steady hand on the legal details until the paperwork settled. The partners sued Ethan for restitution. Some things moved slowly, but they moved. People asked if I felt vindicated. The truth is I felt something more complicated. Relief, a chill of anger that would never quite thaw, and finally, the soft, strange thing that follows survival. I'd planned and fought and sat under fluorescent lights, and in courtrooms, and in kitchens at midnight. I'd climbed on a table with frosting in my shoes and a microphone in my hand, and made a choice to be public about something private. He had told me once in that hallway that my place was to just be a mom. I did. I guarded my children legally, publicly, and with every bone in my body. I was a mother who learned how to use the truth like a locksmith uses a key, careful, specific, and utterly effective. In the end, I didn't need to smash him. I simply made his house of lies require a new foundation. When the judge signed the final temporary custody order, I sat in my car outside the courthouse and let the sound of the city exist without it being a threat. Emma climbed into the backseat with a crayon drawing of our family, no necklace or scandal in sight. She slid it across to me and said, "Mommy, can we eat ice cream?" I laughed, real, messy, delicious, and said yes. He wanted me to be a mom who faded. I chose to be the kind of mom who fought like hell and then fed her kids ice cream when it was over. That was my revenge. I kept my kids my dignity, and I taught them exactly what to do when someone tries to rewrite your life. Tell the truth, and don't be afraid to use a microphone.